basil just wasn't what you needed.
Right. The
And you
basil's
don't
made,
want a basil 'cause he
the
turned into a
basil's made
robot.
exactly the same for every child in the
That's
room.
right.
And we're a personalized learning district. And we cannot say that out of one side of our mouth and then not provide different text for kids in classrooms.
Well,
So
and we
that
don't-
has been our goal.
And we don't want teachers who only know how to read the basil and teach from it. We want the ones who have learned art teaching and can go find what
Right.
they need.
Right.
It's just having the resources there. So
I
that's
think
my
we are on the
concern.
exact same page.
Oh, good. Let's get our soapbox out.
That's
The
right.
State Department. We
Are
can
there
tell them
other
what to do.
questions from people less passionate than Miss Carrie and me?
Well, I talked to Dr. Gary one time down there, and I said, who's in charge of elementary? Because that was my concern. Who's in charge of elementary education? Oh, the State Department. He said, oh, no, Miss Gary. You don't want to go.
Okay, I think we do need a motion if there aren't other questions.
Any other questions?
I'll make it, that's all right.
We're wide open, so.
Okay, I'd like to make a move to accept the administration's recommendation to adopt the proposed textbooks for the 2024-25 school year.
We have a motion from Ms. Carey to accept the administration's recommendation to adopt the proposed textbooks for the 2024-2025 school year. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second with Ms. Baltnight. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously. All right, while you are up there, we will move on to item 5.2, second reading approval of policy IC school year.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. This is the policy we presented in February for first reading. There have been no changes. This is essentially just how we use our days during the school year to reflect our current practice.
All right, so you have heard the presentation from the administration. Any questions? All right, any motions?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we give second reading approval of policy IC school year as presented by the administration.
We have a motion from Ms. Baltnight to give second reading approval of policy IC school year as presented by the administration. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second with Mr. Kaufman. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously. Now we will move on to 5.3, first reading approval of policy GCAAA sick leave bank with Ms. Bryant.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I include the administrative
Oh, yeah,
rule
you sure can.
with
We'll
that?
do-
Because
yes, ma'am,
they're
that
kind
is
of
good.
married.
We will do both of those.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am, thank you. This policy, it relates, as she said, to our sick leave bank, and it has not been updated since June of 2006. There were lots of titles that were wrong that, I went in and changed, obviously, but there were a couple of things that I thought were of concern. For instance, the policy previously allowed for only one representative to cover Lifelong Learning Center and the district office staff. And I felt that that was a little bit unfair to the Lifelong Learning Center as they are a distinct facility. And the other 4 facilities all get their own representatives. And they get 2, but because Lifelong Learning is a smaller staff, we thought it would be appropriate to recommend 1 to represent district office, which of course would include technology and maintenance, and then let Lifelong Learning have its own representative. It just seemed more equitable for that staff. And then we did want to consider adding this little caveat here that if you have previously petitioned and received sick leave benefits, that you would not be eligible for the committee, because we wonder about the objectivity of the person making the decision if they have been a beneficiary of the policy. And then there are lots of little changes throughout where I had to go from 6 to 10 committee members to make up it went from 5 of 9 had to be present to 6 of 10. And then we also wanted just to make sure that we are good stewards of the sick leave bank and that we will always have that opportunity when it's needed. On the page under eligibility for requesting days, we did add that you must not have received sick leave benefits within a 5-year period. You could apply again after a 5-year period has passed, just so that we have enough so that we could serve those who need them. Do you have questions?
I had a question about the petitioning and receiving, not eligible to be on the committee. When I read that, it said petitioned and received, and I read your little breakdown here that you might think there was a bias. What about if you petitioned but you didn't receive? That may be the person.
I think you need to do it or,
that may be
and
the-
or received. I think you're
That may be
right.
the person that had the bias.
Yeah, you're right. You're very right. So I think that, would y'all be in agreement if it's okay for, and I'll change that for second reading, that we'll do and or. I think that that's
Good point.
a great point, Mr. Coffin. Thank you.
And my other question was about the 5-year period. I assume people only request this when there's been some kind of catastrophic event or something. I would assume that. So the person that might have had 2 of those events in 3-year period, I wouldn't want to not help them if they needed help. Now,
Yeah,
I just
we,
wondered, should we add a caveat that says, or evaluated on extensive circumstances or something to that effect? Just a thought.
Or maybe, a new event. You know, it might be with one person one time, but another person another time, family member.
Well, I would agree with that too, because there's a lot that can happen in 5 years, you know, that may not necessarily be the same thing, or it could be the same thing, but to have that in there at 5 years, then, I mean, it makes them ineligible to even petition, which my thought would be, if there's a full committee, regardless whether it's one person or 5 people, then it's left up to the committee who does it, you know? And if they feel like somebody, based on their events, deserve it within the 5-year period, opposed to somebody else that's petitioning, I mean, that's what that committee's there for. But if you have that stipulation in there with that hard stance of 5 years, then that's out the window.
Or maybe just throw a general statement at the end that said, or we will consider extenuating circumstances and override any rule.
What about, at the same time, I don't know that it needs to be for the same problem over and over and over, but I don't want to take the parent who has problems with 2 different children or aging parents and a child, you know, 2 completely different situations.
Well, you know, I'm not privy to everything that's ever happened with the sick leave bank, but we have had some situations where, let me rephrase, I don't know of a case that's had 2 different situations, but I do know that, there have been some that have been granted for the same situation, and, you know, you can get up to 55 days at a time. And quite honestly, when you're getting that over and over again, it really depletes the supply. We can't do this without the donated days from the people. They don't come the district just doesn't cover it. And so I feel a responsibility to, as I said, be a good steward, but also the committee is great. But many times they're peers of the people, and in our community, it's a lot of pressure to put on the committee to make those fine decisions. I mean, we've got people who are perfect to serve on this committee because they're logical, they're rational, they're caring, but they also have some rationality about them, who are now not serving because they're treated poorly by the people who have petitioned and not gotten them. So, you know, there are lots of things involved in that committee.
So are you suggesting that on that one that we put within a 5-year period with the exact same set of circumstances?
Something like
or
that,
add
right. You
that
know,
with-
sometimes people
with,
have just completely different circumstances. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. It would be a new problem.
I just personally think 5 years is a long time to be locking somebody out, you know. I wouldn't have a problem with new circumstances personally, but my biggest problem would just be the length of time. Whether it just be, I don't know, every other year, you know, or every 3 years, but I think 5 years is a long time.
It's too much.
Put them in 3 3?
We can definitely amend to 3.
I mean, I could amend to 3.
Yeah, could you make a change about
Well,
a
well,
new
do you-
problem, or if you go to 3, do you need to make the change about it being different problems?
I mean, that would take care of the other concerns,
Well,
you
you-
said, with, you know, within a 3-year period for the exact same
Right.
circumstance.
Okay. And I do appreciate the fact that it stipulates this is not for elective surgeries, this is not for anything you do in summer.
Right, right,
And
right.
I think
Yeah.
there have been people who missed that mark, and
Well,
and they didn't quite get that, but,
I think that, I don't know that the interpretation of catastrophic has been fully carried out either.
Yeah,
So,
I was gonna say, maybe we need to delve into defining that a little
Yeah.
bit deeper, you know, as well.
I would think that the average person probably would go most of their life not having to do that.
exactly.
Right.
Okay, so if you got somebody requesting every other year, then there's a problem there. It's
Right.
not,
Yeah.
it's not with the policy, it's a problem with them.
right. I will say, when you start dealing with aging parents, you hit this certain age bracket, and you're there. When you start dealing with aging parents, it can be one parent or another, and one will be 1 year and one will be the next.
You're right, you're right.
What if you put a total number of days in that 5 years? You just said you could get 55.
Yeah, that's
So
what
if
you
I
can
got
apply
50
for, up to
So
55.
if I got 55 this year, I'd have to wait 5 years before I can get 55 more.
55
But if I only got 10 this year, then I could get 10 every year for 5 years, and that's the same amount of days, so.
Well, we could say 55 within 3 years, and that still does the same.
That'd cover that.
Right.
Covers it.
Yeah. That works.
Or would there even be a way, if it is a situation like that, where that situation may ongo
That can start.
more than 1 year, is there a way to say no more than X number of days in any year? You know, if it is the same event?
Well, and I will
You
go
know?
ahead and say, I appreciate that point, Ty, I really do, because that's one of the concerns, because I want to do right by our people. But also, you know, this could be a classroom teacher, and you're talking about 55 days. And then you think about that's your child's classroom teacher. You know, I mean, I think being a teacher is, you know, absence is so impactful. I mean, and so, and when I presented it, it was, yes, it is about being a good steward, but it's also, we have been in situations in the district where there have been ongoing health issues in families that have, and while I hurt for them, I also hurt for those children who don't have proper instruction during that time. So I really think we need to balance what we do. And I'm perfectly okay. I mean, it's not gonna hurt my feelings if you want to, you know, not pass this one tonight and let me plow through it a little more and give you some other options.
So what if what if somebody applied and they got 10 days this year? Then they couldn't get more days for 5 more years?
Well, that's something we'd have to decide, but I don't really know of many circumstances where they apply for 10 days.
Usually it's gonna be those.
It's usually a
that
big
long.
chunk of time. And you have to remember, you know, the district gives 12 days a year that everybody gets. And you really have needed to be a good steward of your days. That's part of the clause as well, because, you know, like veteran people have 90 days in every year. And so they usually don't apply for those small amounts. And you of course have to exhaust all that before you can apply for these. But,
So if a person applied for a huge chunk like that, would it be within the committee's, you know, whatever's kosher with them to say, well, we can't approve 55, but we
Yes.
can approve 20?
yes,
There's been years when the bank was out of days, and
Yeah.
we had to send out an email asking for new donations. So-
and see, that's
to
the
address
thing,
Other people.
yeah.
Now, I don't think that's happened in the last few years, but that has occurred where the bank's completely empty and had to ask for additional donations.
And usually those people donating those days are the ones who are here in and out every day, you know? So there's a lot to consider.
So on any given year, how many people do you give 55 days to?
I can only speak to this year, but it's happened for multiple people this year, at least 2 that I know of.
this is a side question, and it's mostly for the ones that are hired, not veterans like, you know, but the younger hires. Don't we front the days for some of them that are hired? How many days?
Everybody starts, if you come to
With
work on the
12.
first day of school, or the first day that you're reporting
Right.
to work, you're given 12.
You're given 12 days. So the idea we want to push is, you know, try to conserve those days unless you're gonna need them.
Right, and then also, you know, we have the short-term disability that once you reach 90 days, if they, you know, decide to opt into that.
Yeah, but you know, back in the day, I mean, now we've got family leave and all that, and it's not all paid, but hey, if you needed days, you tried to always save 6 weeks, because you might break your leg or foot, and you needed 6 weeks. So.
Well, and I think it's important to remember too, I know this doesn't affect, you know, maternity leaves and things like that, but we only had that since last year.
That's what I'm saying. We
So
didn't
this
have it
group
for
of
maternity
teachers
leave.
has a benefit that many of
We
us
didn't have.
did not have the opportunity
No,
to take advantage
I
of.
used sick leave days, and Francis used sick leave days, and you just had to make sure you kept
I
it.
had my son on graduation day,
Yeah,
good planning.
I'm still sour because my oldest daughter had jaundice and I was out the second day and got docked for it.
and I get it. He also went to the coaches clinic.
I did.
My husband did too.
So then do we want them to come back maybe next month with some
Little bit
other
different.
suggestions or some other ways that we could still get a handle on this without going straight?
Absolutely.
years.
That's
Okay.
not an issue at
You're
all.
not pressed for time, are you?
No,
Okay.
I'd like to have something in place July 1.
Okay,
So I just brought it because something came across my desk, and I knew that was something we wanted to look at before the new school year, because whatever's in place now will run until June 30th.
okay.
So-
Well, I appreciate, excuse
Go
me.
ahead, go ahead.
I appreciate the fact that you're looking at it from all angles too.
Thank
Like
you.
the teacher in the classroom
The
and those
student.
children without that certified teacher in the classroom. It's a lot.
It
to
is a
take
lot.
in. It really is.
It is a
And-
lot.
And I know you all will come up with a good
with a compromise, I think,
recommendation.
yes.
That's
You'll-
right.
You'll
Thank
have to remind me of this, the numbers specifically, but I'm sure that in the policy, it says that after a certain amount of days, you have to decide, you know, you're either gonna continue working or you're not.
Well,
Is it
state,
90 days?
federal law is 90 days. That's
what I
not,
thought. I
that's
thought it
not,
was
that
90.
trumps, our policy reflects that, but state, we cannot, dismiss someone based on attendance until that 91st day of
Right.
consecutive. So if the person shows up one day, the clock starts over. So, and there are people who realize that. So, I mean, that is an issue as well. And, we're in a bad situation when things like that happen, because it comes back to the classroom instruction. And again, I don't want to at all come across that I'm not being compassionate to our people, because I'm one of those people, and I truly try to do what's right. But I really think there needs to be some adjustment to this, for all of those reasons.
So your time bank, what's a average number that you
I
have?
can have that for you next
That you
time.
have in there on any given day?
Yeah, and
On any given
it varies, and like he said, there have been times, and that's not unique, other districts go through that same thing of running out of sick bank days. But I can tell you that just in my career, as you mentioned, saving the days is a thing of the past. It is just not the common practice now of saving those days.
Well, if you're averaging 100 days, then it's different if you're averaging 10,000 days, you know?
Right,
The number's in there
Yeah.
somewhere, but
Yeah, well, you have to remember, we each give a day. If you're a member of the sick bank, you give a day every 5 years. And, there aren't that many of us.
I was gonna
If
say,
everybody
it's not-
gave a
yeah,
day.
it's not-
And not everybody chooses to participate. You totally choose to opt in or out. So not every employee is given a day every 5 years. So, and, you know, a lot of those maybe with 90 are not going to, because they have that cushion. So, just bear all that in mind. It's a total voluntary program. But I will come back next month. I'm not upset that y'all failed me tonight, but, got a big ol' F. But I will come back with some proposals next month. And I do, in all seriousness, I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your insight, and, we'll be better because of it.
We're
And I
not,
thank you.
we're not failing you, we just want.
I
you to
know, I'm just
expand
messing
on
with
it.
you. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, and I don't want the same, one person to have more than one different, totally different circumstance and get.
Well, I'll make sure that whatever I bring has,
Yeah.
I think the 3 years is a good
Right.
suggestion, and I think that's a good suggestion, so I'll work on those two pieces and have a little more data.
So before, before
concrete.
this, there was no number.
There were, I mean, it was a wild, wild west, man.
You want to every year, you know.
Yeah, you could petition every year for the same thing for 100 years. So-
And you don't have to be a member to petition, right?
You do have to be a member to, you have to have contributed your one day every 5 years.
That's, okay, I thought that made sense, I couldn't remember after I read it, but I don't know how to encourage them to do it, but I'm like you, if I got 90 days, but if I got 90 days, that's one day.
Do we know if we've got, I mean, something we need to look into, we have people that have used the donated days to pay into the bank to participate the next time.
Would we know such?
If you receive donated days, do you use one of those to contribute your,
Back.
to the bank so you can still be in it?
No, because if you don't use them,
They
They go
come
back.
back.
we go back. They go back to the sick bank. Yeah.
Right.
We've only had a couple that came back, that,
Okay.
for whatever reason.
Yeah, they don't come back. But that is in the policy that if you don't use them, you can't carry them over the next year. They go back to the sick bank. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, y'all, thank y'all.
Thank you. Okay, we are now on, item 6.0, executive session.
Madam Chair, I make a motion, we move into executive session for discussion of, student appeal and discussion of student matters.
We have a motion from Mr. Kaufman to go into executive session to discuss a student appeal and personnel matters. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second with Mr. Bouknight. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes unanimously. We are now in executive session.